Hey there, how there, hello there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to yet another Cutter Top 10 NBA video brought to you by the Raptors jersey I have of Kyle Lowry, number 7. So, guess what? We're doing another NBA one, and we're going to be looking at the top 10 Cinderellas in NBA history. They don't necessarily have won the title, but just to make an impact, have super impact on everyone and all that. So, let's take a look at the Cinderellas. And no, the Raptors did not make the list. I know they won in 2019. They weren't supposed to beat Milwaukee in the Eastern Conference, but what the heck? They were the 2 seed. Anyway, number 10 is the 2012 Philadelphia 76ers. The 2012 Sixers had Andre Iguodala, the guy that the Raptors should have had instead of Rafael freaking Araujo. Anyway, the 76ers were number 8. They would have to take on the number 1 seed Chicago Bulls in the first round. And the Chicago Bulls um, were good. They had Derrick Rose, who was the MVP, and then, strange enough, Derrick Rose injured himself in Game 2 with a knee injury, and that cost him dearly as Philadelphia finished the job and took out the Chicago Bulls. And basically, if Derrick Rose was healthy, the Bulls might have done well. Anyway, the Sixers beat the Bulls and then would have to take on Boston, their eternal rival. Boston and Philly always have the great rivalry. And then they would push Boston to 7 games in the next round. Boston could have easily fallen flat, but they didn't. The Sixers would have faced Miami in the Eastern Finals, with LeBron, Bosh, and D Wade. But yeah, the Sixers failed. The number 9 seed 1969 Celtics are next on the list. Now you'd be thinking, well, they won the NBA title and they're the Boston Celtics. Why are they a Cinderella? Well, because a lot of their players were over the age of 30. They were still around from the 1959 to 66 heyday. Of course, Bill Russell was player coach. Their dynasty was aging. They actually had to win on the last few days of the season to make the playoffs. And they got the playoff spot, and then they won the Eastern Final to take on the LA Lakers. Those powerful Lakers, they were getting into their groove. Jerry West and Gail Goodrich and a few other players, Happy Harrison. Anyway, Boston took on LA in the finals. Game 7 at the Great Western Forum, one of the greatest Game 7s of all time, saw the 69 Celtics pull it off. Don Nelson, future NBA coach, he made that shot that bounced off the backboard. And in Boston beat the LA Lakers. They won Game 7 in LA. LA had planned to have balloons and a lot of things going for them when the Lakers won. Unfortunately, though, that didn't happen, although they did release the balloons because you might as well. Bill Russell basically left player coaching and, that was it. He was done. And Boston did recover 5 years later to win the title in 1974 and 1976. So it wasn't all bad. Number 8 is the 2011 Memphis Grizzlies, known as the Grit and Grind Grizzlies. They were the 8th seed, and they had a bruising front court and defensive identity, and overwhelmed the San Antonio Spurs. Memphis, 10 years after leaving Vancouver for Memphis, were in, and the Grizzlies seemed to always be an afterthought and all that. However, Zach Randolph from Michigan State, he was a good scorer. Memphis had their toughness. Marc Gasol was there from Memphis. I don't think Paul Gasol was with Memphis. No, he was with LA. It was one of the most defining first round shocks of the modern era. And, Memphis going on to the next round. They fell in the second round, but, they took out the Spurs. The Spurs took a while to get back to prominence, I think, the next year. Number 7, the 94 Nuggets. And a lot of people will be saying, wait a minute, the 94 Nuggets should be higher up on this list. Sorry, I screwed up, didn't I? Yeah, I did screw up. Sorry, I screwed up. It was number 7. Number 7 is the 1977 Trailblazers. Portland were trying to get back in business. It was their seventh season as a franchise and had never made the playoffs before. Portland were trying to get basketball back to the Pacific Northwest, and behind the power of Bill Walton and Maurice Lucas, the Trailblazers looked pretty good. The Blazers would beat Denver and then took care of the LA Lakers to move on to the NBA Finals against the Philadelphia 76ers. The Sixers were decent. They were up 2 games to none, and it looked like that was it. However, Portland would come back with Walton and Lucas and I can't remember any of the guys, but anyway, yeah, that was just brutal. But yeah, Portland won the championship. The number 6 team is the '94 Denver Nuggets. Denver were decent. They only were 2 games below 500. They narrowly made the playoffs. They would take on the number 1 seed Seattle Supersonics. And that was pretty impressive. Seattle looked pretty good. They were up 2 games to none. Remember, the first round of the NBA playoffs was best of 5 until 2003 when it made to be best of 7. So anyway, Denver looked pretty impressive in games 3 and 4 on home turf to make it 2-2, make it game 5 in Seattle. And that was when Seattle had to make a last second shot to go to overtime, but Denver did it. And Mutombo, of course, falling on the floor with the ball behind his head, shouting, "Oh my God." It was just amazing. With Tombo's iconic celebration and his shot blocking ability knocked Seattle out. A lot of people probably would say that what if it was a best of 7? I think Seattle probably would have won games 6 and 7. But unfortunately, because it was a best of 5, they've fumbled. And Denver became the first 8 seed to be a 1 seed in NBA history. They actually put Utah to the sword. They were actually down 3 games to none to Utah, forced to game 7, but lost. Number 5 is the We Believe Warriors of 2007. Before, about 5 to 10 years before their glory days, the Warriors were kind of an afterthought in essence. They were playing in the Oakland Coliseum. They were decent and all that. They had Baron Davis, Steven Jackson, and a few other key players with those Warrior jerseys with the red and yellow W and all that. Going back before they went back to the old days. And they had the Thunderbolt on their jersey and the Thunderbolt mascot. So Golden State proved themselves by taking on the 67-15 Dallas Mavericks in the first round. Dallas looked like they were going to win this series and stomp everyone else in the playoffs. After all, they were the defending Western Conference champs from 2006. They did lose to Miami in the first round. So yeah, so Baron Davis and Steven Jackson aside, the home crowd was big, had over 118 decibels and all that. That's really loud. Style, confidence, and matchup chaos. Although they got whipped in 5 by Utah in the second round, Golden State showed they could believe, and it was the catalyst for the new generation. Number 4 is the 1981 Houston Rockets. Now, the Western Conference was huge because everyone thought the Lakers were going to be the Western Conference champs, repeat as champions, could potentially be. But however, the 1981 Houston Rockets shocked a lot of people. Yeah, the 1981 NBA playoffs were massive and all that. In the bracket, what happened was the top 2 teams in the East and the West would get byes to the conference semifinals. So, and then it was 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5. Uh, the Knicks would get taken out in the best of 3 by Chicago. Philly would sweep Indiana. Kansas City, when there was an NBA team in Kansas City called the Kansas City Kings before they moved to Sacramento, they took out Portland in 3. And the Rockets, the 6 seed, would take on the 3 seed LA Lakers, the defending world champs, and beat them in 3 games. It's like, what the heck? What's even more crazy was that the Lakers were actually not the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. And it was the last time Till 1991, the Lakers were not the number one seed, so they were the number one seed in the West for 9 straight years after that. And this was the only time the Lakers didn't win a playoff series with Magic and Kareem on the team. So Houston, the 6th seed, would take on the 2 seed San Antonio Spurs. The NBA playoffs, just like normal, did not reseed at the end because it would have been Phoenix versus Houston and Kansas City versus San Antonio. So in the West, the number one seed Phoenix Suns were shocked in 7 by the Kings. So Kansas City moved on, and Houston won in Game 7 in San Antonio, their Texas rivals, if you will. So Houston would take on Kansas City. Both teams were below 500. And Houston ended up beating Kansas City in 5, went to the finals, and got taken out in 6 by Boston. It was strange because they were below 500, but they made the playoffs. It's kind of weird because it's usually the Eastern Conference that has the teams below 500 making in. Weird. Number 3 is the 2023 Miami Heat. Miami had a weirder way to get to the NBA Finals. They actually had to play in what they call the play-in tournament. The NBA got the bright idea that the top 6 teams in each conference would get to the playoffs, and then what would happen is the 7, 8, 9, and 10 seeded teams would play in a play-in tournament. 7 would place 8, and 9 versus 10. If you won your 7-8 matchup, you're the 7 seed. Even if you were the number 8 seed in the regular season, you could jump up to number 7 by winning that 7-8 game. The loser would actually not be out of the playoffs. The loser would face the winner of the 9-10 matchup for the 8 seed. So Miami actually lost their 7-8 game, would have to play the Chicago Bulls, who won the 9-10 matchup in Toronto. That was the year DeMar DeRozan's daughter became a bitch. I'm sorry, but that's the way I feel. And anyway, Miami would beat Chicago, helping Toronto out and getting in as the 8 seed. Miami would take care of Milwaukee with Giannis Antetokounmpo in the first round, 8 versus 1. Then took out the New York Knicks, who were starting to get back in the groove. And then Boston. I actually was cheering for Boston. Boston was down 3-0. Miami were 1 win away from knocking out those pesky Heat, but they couldn't do it. Even though Derek White made a last-second shot, literally with 0.1 seconds left to force Game 7 in Boston, they couldn't complete the comeback. And the 2023 Heat took on the Nuggets in the finals. Luckily, happiness would be there for me because Jamal Murray was going to bring the trophy to Kitchener, but the NBA said no. I'm like, fuck you. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Number 2 is the 1999 New York Knicks, being the first 8 seed to make the finals. The 99 Knicks were actually helped out kind of by the lockout, which shortened the season to 50 games. This was the first time the NBA would actually have a season affected by a lockout. Baseball, their first season affected by a lockout was 1972, not 1981 as you think it is. You should read that up. Football, 1982 and 87 had their regular seasons affected. Hockey lost part of the 94-95 season. Of course, this is before 2005. And so basketball was last to go. And they did it. 50 games. The 99 Knicks were number 8. They took on Miami in the first round, best of 5, of course. Game 5, Allen Houston making the running jumper with 0.8 seconds left to send Miami home crying. New York would go on to take care of Atlanta, if I remember correctly. Yeah, and Indiana, taking down Reggie Miller in one of his last great playoff pushes. The Knicks would take on those pesky San Antonio Spurs that had Tim Duncan and David Robinson on the same team. Patrick Ewing was hurt. That kind of hurt the Knicks in a sense because Robinson and Duncan could run roughshod, and they did in 5 games. But at least the Knicks made the finals. But number 1 is actually the 1995 Houston Rockets. A lot of people will be thinking, how were they in Cinderella? They were pretty good. Well, they kind of did. Houston were the 6th seed. And Houston never had home court advantage, not once, not even in the finals. Houston would take care of Utah with Stockton and Malone in the first round, then took on Phoenix with Mario Elie clutch three-pointer against Charles Barkley and the Suns in Game 7 of that series. Then they faced San Antonio, took out David Robinson in their Texas rivals, and they would be going on to face Orlando. Orlando seemed poised. They had Shaq, they had Penny Hardaway, and they had Nick Anderson. Unfortunately, Nick Anderson chose Game 1 to have one of the worst free throw performances of all time. He had 4 free throws to sink the Rockets in Game 1, and he failed all 4 times. Houston won on an Elijah tip with a few seconds left in overtime in Game 1 and then never looked back. Elijah Brilliance, Mario Elie, Ferdinand Maxwell, and a few other Houston players, including Clyde Drexler, came through, and it was one of the greatest playoff runs of all time, bar none. And that's why the 1995 Rockets are the greatest Cinderella of all time. For the NBA, of course. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond to do.